In this lesson, we're going to look at the very first example of how to make decisions in code using something called the simple if statement. Really just if statement, but I like to put the modifier simple on it to distinguish it from two other versions of the if statement that we'll look at later. So let's create a new class. I haven't done that in a while, just so you'll remember how to do it. So we're going to call it if, simple enough. And now we want to open the editor. And from that, we're going to have to get rid of all the code inside so that we can start over again. So give me a moment while I do that. And then we're going to create our void method. Oops. Our public static void main method. Add our curly braces. And now we're ready to start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come outside the class to do a little note taking here. And we'll make it a comment just to be on the safe side. The way we write the simple if in Java is we write the keyword if followed by a relational expression. And then that's followed by, perhaps, I need to make a comment there. Sorry, a statement. That's one form. There's a second form which we can also use, and where we have the if followed by a relational expression. And then we have curly braces, almost forgot the comment again, followed by a set of statements with as many as we want. But the main thing to remember about that is that if you have multiple statements in your if statement, then they have to be surrounded in curly braces. And to make that more easily followed, we're going to require that all of our ifs are written inside curly braces. It's a lot easier. What I'm going to show you here in a moment, not in this form, are some alternatives to the style that I'm using right there. I guess I should put a semicolon right there also. So let's look at some simple examples. We're going to work with numbers primarily just because they're easier. So we create a variable n and assign the value 1. Let me type and then we'll talk about what we've done here. Sorry, there we go. Simple enough. So let's take a look. We have the keyword if followed by the relational expression n greater than 0. And then inside our block, or our curly braces, we have the statement system out print line n is greater than 0. What we're saying is we're saying if the value of n is indeed greater than 0, then write out the string n is greater than 0. So let's try it and see what happens. Compile first and then close. And then we run void main. N is greater than 0. Clearly that's true because n is equal to 1 and 1 is indeed greater than 0. Watch what happens if we change n to 0 in the assignment statement. Now first think about the outcome of this program. Will the phrase, or will the text n is greater than 0 be printed? Well, if n is assigned the value 0, is n going to be greater than 0? That's right, it's not going to be. So let's compile and close and run the program again. And this time we get no output because nothing happened. So let's go back to the statement. I'm sorry, back to the program. So that is how the simple if works. We have the keyword if followed by a relational expression, in this case n greater than 0, and then we have a statement that is to be performed some whatever it has to be. It doesn't have to be this if the relational condition is true. Now I told you I was going to show you a little bit different style, and it's a style I'm going to start using throughout the rest of the text. I'm going to put the initial curly brace. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to delete this space here if I can figure out how to do it. Hang on. There we go. I'm going to put the initial curly brace on the same line as the relational expression. Now, syntactically, I didn't change anything. The program is exactly the same. But I used one less line, and to me, to my eye, it's just a little bit easier to see. Now, do you have to follow my style? Absolutely not. If you want to put the opening curly brace for that block under the if, absolutely do that. But just please be consistent in your style, because it makes your programs a lot easier to read for someone else and for yourself if you follow a consistent style. We can do the very same thing with strings. Let's look at one more example before we leave this. So I'll comment out what we've worked on before. And let's do this. Whoops. Let's do it like that first. I'm trying to avoid user input just because it takes so much more effort to add in the class and all that. So here are, let's change that around. So here we create two strings, a password and a guess, and then our relational expression compares guess to password, checking for equality. And if they're the same, then it's going to display indeed let them in. So let's compile that, close, and then execute. And as you can see, it printed out indeed let them in. Let's clear that. Let's open the editor. And let's change it very discreetly by just capitalizing the I for the guess. Let's compile again. And then run the program. And no input because indeed the two strings are not the same. There's a difference in the I and N between lowercase and uppercase. So that's how the simple if works. And you'll notice it's not very useful because all we can do is we can make one, or we can branch, if you want to call it that, one way. One thing can happen if the relational expression is true. We don't have any, we haven't made a case for what happens if the relational expression is false. And that's going to be the topic of the next lesson, which we're going to move to right now, which is another if statement called the if-else.